Hello and welcome to The Big Picture with me, Ishan. Today we focus on the media reports about the NITI Aayog identifying 32 loss-making companies, the PSUs, for strategic disinvestment. Now, this move promises to kick off PSU reforms in a big way. But disinvestment has also been a hotly contested issue in the country, and such a strong move prompts us to ask, should the government be exiting all non-priority sectors? And will the move get the backing of political parties and trade unions? To help answer these questions, today I am joined by Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Economist. We are also joined by Mr. Dr.Praveen, Professor at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU, Priya Ranjan, Senior Journalist, and Senior Journalist Ashok Tandon as well. Mr. Dash, I'll start with you, and just to put it in context, these are just media reports now, but it's being suggested that an entire roadmap has been drawn up for reforming the PSU space. Could we call this the big ticket measure that was expected from this government?
In the budget itself, along with the renaming of the Department of Disinvestment into a Department of Investment and Asset Management, he had already indicated that of the 56,500 crore that for the current year that he was envisaging to mop up from selling public sector shares, of that 36,000 crore out of this piecemeal disinvestment and 20,500 crore he proposed that will be through strategic sale of PSUs, which is privatization of central public sector undertakings. So as we know that in NDA 1, this kind of strategic sale was part of the policy,
right?
And privatization as a word actually was for the first time. It was Yashwant Sinha as the finance minister, who 2001, if I am not mistaken, where he actually used the word privatization. Right. So this strategic sale, as part of the first NDA 1, it was part of the policy, but then over these years, that has been given a go by, and it appeared, given Prime Minister Modi's time and again emphasis on the role of public sector, it appeared as if the government, the present government, wasn't very inclined to invite political difficulties by again going back to that kind of a path. And so in the budget there was indication that they were thinking of doing so, and the finance minister of course had said that this asset management, what it would mean is, like in an enterprise, it is may not be strategic sale of an entire enterprise, but within an enterprise, a unit, if the enterprise thinks that it will be viable or better, that can be sold off, so that the enterprise can go in for a new unit. For instance, NTPC doing away, selling off one of its
so you think there were enough indications
to invest in another.
So there were enough indications, but Mr. Ashok Tandon, the point being also that the targets have been ambitious with as far as disinvestment is concerned, but those targets have really not been met. Even last year, there was a shortfall in drug. The government had to revise its target by over 57%, I think, as far as what it would generate out of PSU disinvestment. So in that sense, this strategy, would it be able to get consensus as well?
I think it's too early to in fact, come to such issues, because what apparently has been, as you say, the media report, is basically to initiate a debate on this issue. As our learned friend was saying, in the NDA 1 also, this particular issue became highly controversial. And within the BJP's own Sangha Parivar also, there have been a lot of reservations. So I personally feel this idea at the moment is to initiate a nationwide debate among all the stakeholders, including the trade union, and also particularly the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh and the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. So therefore, I think it's basically an initial stage of a nationwide debate which NITI Aayog would like to have before we come to prospects of working out details of proposed disinvestment. So I think at this stage we can only say that there should be a very healthy debate on this issue, because as being pointed out earlier also, the 10 years of UPA also could not do much because of it was depending on the left front for quite some for support. So similarly in this government also, there is a very strong opinion against the use of word privatization. So even disinvestment also is seen in certain quarters as a dirty word. So where do we go from here? So as you said, the roadmap is yet to be drawn, but before that, let there be a healthy debate among all the stakeholders, and let us see what emerges out of that.
All right, but then the question that needs to be asked, Mohan Guruswamy, is shouldn't the government have this roadmap prepared in terms of what it wants to do with these ailing PSUs? It seems that the roadmap is being suggested, and have we moved beyond the point of debate about this, as Mr. Tandon is saying?
I think time for debate is over. There's no doubt that the public sector loses a lot of money. Except for the administered pricing companies like oil and coal, everybody loses money. The opportunity loss and the real loss of the public sector is now over 10 lakh crores. Okay, and you're losing money, you're bleeding every day. People's money has been invested. And disinvestment, mostly this word which doesn't exist in the dictionary, means that you are selling your shares to publicly owned undertakings like LIC, UTI and all, which have got people's savings, and you're pushing the shares on them. There's very little retail investment in there. Coal India has got some FII investment, but otherwise it's all held by public financial institutions. Now, what does it achieve? Problem is the companies are loss-making. It doesn't matter if government owns it or doesn't own it. They should make profits. They should be sustainable. And each year, it costs more money to keep them afloat. Air India, for a typical example, has costed us 43,000 crores now already. And this year also, they're going to make an operational loss. After all these inputs coming, they wanted 9,000 crores. That also they got. Then they're going to make an operational loss. So how, and you're depriving somebody of schools, somebody of canal systems. It's at the cost of people who cannot speak. Okay. In this country, people without a voice.
So you're saying it's high time that the government got out of PSUs?
And there was a plan in Yashwant Sinha's time. You mentioned privatization. We took it as a route. We said, let the banks and financial institutions pick up the holdings of these companies. Let them own these companies. And since government is not a good seller of business, and there's always some racketeering which takes place, let the banks and the FIs own this companies and let them take it to progressive restructuring, disinvestment, whatever you want. Take out some divisions, put it together, because they are better equipped to do it, because they're in business. But even then, the so-called left lobby kicked up a ruckus.
Okay.
And saying that, you shouldn't do it. This is privatization.
I think Dr. wants to come in on that. And, it's about the fact that the need for PSUs, the need for public sector undertakings in this economy, how we're shaping up in terms of global competitiveness, is that the best way forward? And is there any way to reform such PSUs, or it's the best way for the government to get out, as Mohan's been suggesting?
Listen, I think we need to have a much more nuanced view instead of having simplistic views that sell it off, retain it, etc. As Mohan rightly said, the question of ownership in itself is not a very good yardstick for judging whether the company will do well or not do well. The literature is full of all kinds of companies in terms of ownership, doing all kinds of things in terms of performance. There is the economics of public sector units, there is politics of public sector units, etc. Right? So we need to kind of take these two dimensions separately in some sense. If you're talking just about the economics of it, there is nothing in economic theory which tells us why public sector unit should be loss-making. If you look at our actual experience, there are lots of companies in, let's say, mining, steel, petroleum. I'm looking at the most recent data, power generation and transmission, financial services, heavy engineering, transportation equipment, contract and construction services, industrial development, tech consultancy services, tourist services. In all these, you have a large profit-making presence of public sector units, right? On the other hand, if you look at textiles, consumer goods, transport services, telecommunication services, record has been pretty bad. In fact, in some cases, it's been pretty dismal. Then you have chemicals and pharmaceutical sectors, agro-based industries, medium and light engineering, where you have a mixed picture.
Okay.
Some profit-making, some loss-making, and so on and so forth. So, in other words, there is nothing in terms of the economic theory and the economic experience which should warrant a view that, you know, write off public sector and so on and so forth. Public sector, of course, were designed with a whole lot of objectives. Now, if those objectives are not being fulfilled, you need to ask, how do we reform the public sector?
The point being,
instead of you know, simply selling off.
but for a
whatever you
company,
have.
shouldn't the ultimate goal be profit rather than a lot of other things that happened
see,
with the public sector undertakings in India? And Mohan also wants to come in.
No, 2 points. 2 points. One is that, you know, public sector were not designed only to make profits. However, they should be self-sustaining in the long run and so on, because they perform a whole lot of social functions, right, which are important to take into account, right? So, for instance, let's say financial inclusion,
Okay.
right, reaching the unbanked and so on and so forth, right? Now, it is in, you know, a spirit of this kind that even though
Well, then-
Bharatiya Janata Party is supposed to be very,
So,
very...
for example, then Air India.
I'll come to that in a minute. Just give me a minute. But you know, the Prime Minister last week, he in a statement to the Wall Street Journal, he said, "You can't." I'm quoting him. "You can't suddenly get rid of the public sector, nor should you." Now, that is where the politics, etc., of it comes up. Now, if you are talking about Air India, and Air India has been possibly among the most notorious in terms of making losses, etc. But if you look at the May statement of the minister, the aviation minister, Mr. Raju, I think, he says that now in May, it has gone into profit now.
Okay.
It's a small profit, 8 crores, right? Operational
Okay,
profit.
fair enough. Point taken. You're saying that there's nothing valid that validates the view.
Ishan,
Okay, Mohan wants to come in.
But the main point, I'm saying, you know, in fact, many of these loss-making units have been because of extremely bad politics. That is the important point. It has nothing to do with economics.
All right,
So, two comments. to make. Economic theory will have nothing on public sector, because management theory, you have to look into those books, whether, you know, what kind of ownership is good for successful and, you know, efficient operations, and what kind of competition environment is required for that. So there you'll find nothing in economic theory for that.
No, so that's what I'm saying
Look in management books.
No, but
You'll find management theory.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
That is one. Two, apart from companies which have administered pricing, which means that the price is fixed by the state comfortably, nobody else makes a profit. The original plan document says that you will not only give us the rate of return, you will give us the rate of return plus some operational surplus plus expansion. You don't even get your rate of return. The opportunity cost is pegged at 8%.
So
We never got 8% in the entire 60 years. And this is huge. The total public sector fixed asset investment is bigger than the private sector. It's the biggest part of our economy, and it doesn't generate surpluses. Where will you get money for capital investment? You got to think of these things. And what does social control mean? Control of some deputy secretary and joint secretary who rule the roost. Now you got to restructure. Therefore I said, it doesn't matter if the government owns the companies or doesn't own the companies. But you got to restructure the management. You got to make them independent. You got to make them take operational decisions. You got to make strategic decisions. It can't come to joint secretaries and deputy secretaries who are now
from a management
who are
perspective,
sitting on the commanding heights of the economy.
Okay, so from a management perspective, there should certainly be more independence. And I think the finance minister has repeatedly talked about this, even for the banking sector in particular, Priya Ranjan. I remember him mentioning such things about the fact that the accountability has to ultimately be with the undertaking, and it can't come down to politics, but then that is what often happens in our country. And even building consensus over such an issue, as the Prime Minister's statement also pointed out, would be a difficult affair.
See, insofar as politics is concerned, on the left and on the right, they are hardly, based on economic rationale of it, or the pragmatic, the practical aspect of it. If you get into a dogma as to no public sector company can be profitable, so they should be dispensed with, or can be well managed, so they should be, or that everything should be state-owned and public sector, because that's the best way, social purpose and things like that. That is political dogma, and it's not really related to the. Just look at the current situation. Now you'll have a situation when the Prime Minister, what has been mentioned. Now he has to manage this economy. Now at present you have a situation where private sector is not investing. That's what the Prime Minister meant when he said that you cannot just wish away public sector from a developing economy like ours, because the state, even in terms of building enterprises, has an important role. The state has to today, and in fact for the last couple of years, the economic recovery that we see today is essentially happening because of public investment. So the public investment, of course, there are many areas where public investment is made. Now, should it be made in the kind of traditional public sector type of areas or not? That is the question. The re-engineering of government investment or the public investment is the question. So that is why the management, this creation of this new department and renaming, not creation, but renaming of the new department, shows a certain pragmatic approach.
Yeah, and I think
that where you are looking at, okay, if you need to strategic sale of a particular unit or an entire enterprise or a loss-making.
So the government is not going about it as the report says.
It will be very unfortunate to sort of, again, we have been, as Mr. Tandon was pointing out, we've been caught in this political spin for so many years now, over 20 years now. And so not being able to make real reforms in this area, very important area, which can really bring about, tremendous economic spin-offs.
Yeah, and that's the point I want to ask Mr. Tandon as well. I want to get him into the conversation.
So you need to take a pure economic rational view on the thing.
There are issues of equity also.
Yes, all kinds of issues are involved. But it will be very important that you take a practical.
All right, so you're saying the government is taking a pragmatic approach. Mr. Tandon, how difficult will it be for the government to explain it to, as was pointed out, both the left and the right, even within the right?
See, in certain cases like hotels, public sector hotels, and even to a great extent Air India, I don't think there will be any debate. But as has been pointed out, in large number of public sector undertakings, there is a social responsibility in the social aspects. You can't even only look at the economics of it. So therefore, it will have to be seen.
But what do we mean by, for everybody's understanding, what do we mean by social aspects?
I'll tell you, economics, your wishes don't count. You want to, you would like to dispose of Air India. You just cannot wish that you will dispose of Air India. Who is going to pick up? You want to privatize Air India. You, as a roadmap, you decide that, okay, we'll privatize Air India. Who is going to buy that Air India?
With 50,000 crore,
50,000 crore in debt,
and jobs,
and being
social
sustained on a
responsibilities, their jobs, let them run it.
So, nobody is in a position, you'll have a negative value to Air India at this point.
What is the social responsibility of Scooters India, which does not produce a single scooter, where people are on payroll for the last 30 years?
No, and that's
let's finish. The social responsibility is to the vast mass of the people. There are only about less than 2 million people in the organized public sector. There are 450 million people in the unorganized sector. Who looks after them? They don't get provident fund, they don't get medical benefit, they don't get bonus, they don't get 7-day, 6-day working weeks or 5-day working weeks. They work their backs off. There's no protection for them. Suddenly a small group of people become an elite in this country and they're politically well connected, they fund rich trade unions, they fund political leaders, and they have a huge voice. And we talk about social responsibility.
Hasn't it, but Dr. Jha, hasn't it become sort of a nexus between, I would not want to use that word, but as Mohan was pointing out, the problem seems to be an alliance in terms of what the voices from the trade unions want and their stake in it, as well as other stake in it, and ultimately it's the taxpayers' money would be the argument that would be given.
You see, social responsibility.
Not the taxpayers' money, it's the people's money. Don't say taxpayers, there are only 2 million taxpayers.
No,
Yeah,
no.
that's
I
also
mean,
true.
no, indirect taxes have been paid by everybody. So in that
People's
sense,
money.
it is taxpayers' money, it's people's money, citizens' money, call it whatever you will. But if you want, I mean, you can define it in multiple ways, social responsibility, etc. Let me quote what the minister said, talking about the unique contribution of Air India. He says, in this hour of crisis, evacuating about 6,000 nationals from Yemen, 1,300 from Iraq, just listen to me, and Libya, 17,500 passengers, etc., from quake-affected Nepal and so on and so forth. Now, listen, you may consider it very minor.
But can't it-
But
Wouldn't
listen to
somebody
me.
else have
No,
sent planes?
no, nobody else.
Why?
I mean, just a sec, Mohan. This would have to be done by the government. No private sector
But can't the
company-
government get private sector companies to
You're
fly
chartering
planes?
flights for
Listen,
Hajj.
sure you can
You're
do that.
chartering flights for Hajj. Why
Sure,
can't you
sure.
do it here?
Listen. Now, what I'm saying is that if there is a problem in the way these companies are being managed, it needs to be examined. What is the root of the problem? As I said, if you are basically messing it up politically, don't blame public sector simply because it's public sector.
All right, you're saying the public sector is not a bad word. Public sector.
And I gave you
I
lots
want
of
to get in Mr.
examples.
Tandon because he's been sitting very patiently and we interrupted him last time
I
as
gave
well.
you lots of examples of public sector companies
Doing
which have
well.
been doing very well.
And they're part of, they're also Fortune 500 companies.
One correction.
Yeah, globally
Public-
and in India.
Any company, the services can be commandeered and requisitioned by the state in any time of emergency.
We've
You've got
had that with the
planes,
banks.
and we've taken Indigo planes,
No, no,
other
but-
planes also.
But tell me which banks, which private sector banks will go to the unbanked masses in this country?
All right, so
I mean,
in
that
terms
is-
of
that is what, a very obvious example of social responsibility.
all right, Mr. Tandon, but you've been questioning the government on this as well, asking them questions as well about the future roadmap. How do you envision the government moving forward on this? Because what the report suggests is a rather balanced approach from my perspective. What would your perspective be?
I have a feeling the government will have to adopt a very pragmatic approach, a cautious approach, because the experience of the NDA-1 on this issue has not been very good. Let me be very frank. Because certain issues were raised by the trade unions and from the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, and at the end of the day, there were allegations of corruption in this. So therefore, one has to tread very carefully in this matter. So therefore, as I said initially, let there be a debate on this issue. I don't think the government should be in a hurry to do it, because already in the last 2 years, they have not come forward with any
Right, but they've
roadmap.
set targets. They set targets of about 60,000 crores to be generated through disinvestment. Last year, that did not happen because of the volatility of the markets and the fact that the FIIs weren't willing to park their funds in the sector, in these
No, but
undertakings as well.
even in the next remaining 3 years of this government, I have a feeling there will be a very cautious approach. They will not do it in a big way, and therefore, maybe step by step, sector by sector, there may be a review of it, and then after a very considered thought, the government may come up with a roadmap. It is not going to be an
All
easy
right.
thing,
Ashok
and
spoke
therefore
about
it's going to
allegations
be a
of-
very slow process, and there will be a debate on this issue.
He spoke
all right,
about
but the-
allegations
the
of
point is-
corruption with good reason. There were serious allegations of corruption because that kind of auctioning system, which gives discretion to some people, will be misused. And when it's not done
All right, so an
transparently, it gets
open,
misused.
practical approach could be perhaps the best way forward, but at a time when you need investment in the economy, your private sector is not contributing, as Priya Ranjan was pointing, isn't it upon...
At the same time, I may point out that the urgency is you can't be putting off, postponing it indefinitely.
Listen.
You have to have a comprehensive, cohesive strategy
Okay.
as to what you do with this. As I was saying that, it's already regretful that it has taken over 20 years for as a country for us to arrive at a rational, practical approach.
Right.
What I was saying is, last year, the loss-making public sector losses went up, and the profit-making central enterprises, their profits went down. It is the urgency of the situation can be gauged from that.
All right, so
there
it
are
could
enterprises.
get
There
worse.
are enterprises like BSNL. At one point, it was gold. Today, it's where
All
the
right, so
value
we're-
is.
Like-
Nobody
That's
will
fine.
pick it
We're
up.
running out of time. I want to give the last
you
word to Dr. Jha because he's been disagreeing with
large
the three of
values
you.
are being lost. That also is very
Okay,
important.
last 30
There
seconds,
is-
please.
There's no real roadmap or any such thing. In fact, it's fundamentally all this is motivated by the desire to make some resources available for government's expenditure, etc. And if you look at last 6 years, I mean, in fact, in 2010-11, it was 22,000 crores through this investment. Last year, as you already mentioned, it was about 25,312 crores and so on and so forth. Fundamentally, this is what the government wants to do. Given the complexity of, the whole thing, government will.
You're saying there's no roadmap right now. Mohan wants a roadmap, and
I don't want. I said, this whole business of saying ek bahas honi chahiye, which is typical. So that means another 10 years you're not going to take a decision.
All right, so you're saying a decision is imminent and is necessary right now. What decision that will be? What will that roadmap be by the NITI Aayog? We'll be discussing that again and again here on the big picture. But thank you very much for all of you for coming in.
I do not want disinvestment, full stop.
Okay, fair enough. We'll discuss this issue once again. We'll discuss this issue once again. We've run out of time. We've run out of time. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for coming in. We'll, of course, continue this topic once again. Thanks so much for watching Rajya Sabha TV.